When Chris opens his loud garage doors, he's hit with a bad smell that startles him. As he goes inside, he feels sick because of the disgusting smell. He realizes the smell is coming from his neighbor's package. Chris thought his neighbor had ordered a monthly box of meat, but it turned out there was no meat inside at all. It was a completely surprising and unexpected experience for him. Chris Jordan was just a regular guy living in a normal town. Everyone in the neighborhood knew him as a friendly and helpful neighbor who was always willing to lend a hand. Little did Chris know, his life was about to change when he agreed to help out a new neighbor. Chris had been in the same house for 11 years, and whenever a new family moved in, he greeted them warmly. So, when his new neighbor asked Chris to collect his mail and packages while he was away, Chris happily agreed, being the friendly neighbor he was. The new neighbor was younger than Chris, a YouTuber who liked making quirky videos in the hopes of becoming famous online. At first, Chris didn't mind. He thought, he's just young. But Chris had no idea how far his neighbor would go to achieve viral fame. One Friday afternoon, Chris heard a knock at the door. He answered and was surprised to see his YouTuber neighbor. It turned out his neighbor was going away for a few weeks and asked Chris to get his mail while he was gone. Chris was relieved to hear this. At least he'd be out of the way. But Chris had no idea what was coming his way. Then one night, Chris came across a package at the front of his neighbor's house. Written on it was "Return to Sender" in bright red. It took around 15 minutes, and Chris had finally managed to transport his neighbor's large box into his own garage. But as he opened the squeaky garage doors, he suddenly lost grip on the box and it fell to the ground. He heard a crack coming from inside the box, and Chris stopped in his tracks. Whoops! He hoped it was nothing too expensive, but Chris had no idea what he had just done. After pushing the box into the corner of the garage, Chris pulled down his squeaky garage doors and headed back inside his home. He had forgotten all about the box until a few days passed. Suddenly, one day, he noticed something that made him sick to his stomach. A terrible smell was lingering in the house. Chris searched all around his house, inspecting each and every corner and nook. But then he realized he hadn't checked his garage. He opened the squeaky garage door, and the repulsive smell knocked Chris back. He walked inside the garage, covering his nose. He had no idea what he was about to uncover, but then he realized something. The smell was coming from the box in the corner. Chris felt a terrible feeling hit the pit of his stomach as he looked at his neighbor's box. At first, Chris thought perhaps his neighbor had ordered one of those monthly meat subscription boxes. Chris covered his nose as he got closer to the box. He picked up a pair of scissors and bent down, but then he saw the box was soggy. Chris was repulsed straight away. As Chris opened the box, he was met with a smell so disgusting, his mouth dropped wide open. When he saw his neighbor inside the box, he was evidently dead, but in one piece. He ran out of his garage and called for help on his cell phone. Chris felt sick to his stomach. Quick as a flash, the cops turned up, but Chris wasn't prepared for what he would later find out. As expected, the cops took Chris in for interrogation, seeing as he was the one with the corpse in the garage. Thankfully, they realized he had nothing to do with it and let him go. But there was something inside the box, alongside his neighbor's corpse, that was a crucial piece of evidence that would change everything and ultimately prove Chris's innocence. The neighbor was holding a vlogging camera. The cops showed Chris the footage from his neighbor's camera. He had no idea what he was going to watch, but he knew he had to find out. You see, the footage showed Chris's neighbor sitting inside the box at a shipping facility. He spoke into the camera and told people he was going to mail himself across the county. He had food, blankets, flashlights, and bottles. The plan was foolproof, or that's what he thought. He didn't know what he was getting himself into. His neighbor thought this prank was going to make him go viral. Soon enough, people worldwide would hear about the guy who mailed himself home. He would get thousands of views on his channel and make a good profit from ad revenue. Maybe he would even get some interviews on mainstream media, and people did indeed end up hearing about him. But it was for a much more harrowing and eerie reason. Throughout the following hours of footage, Chris's neighbor seemed cool, calm, and collected despite being stuck and crammed inside a box. At one point, he told his viewers he thought he was in a truck ready to be delivered. But in the last piece of footage in Chris's neighbor's harrowing video diary, he confidently told the camera he had a feeling he was near home. Then suddenly, the box toppled over, and the shot went to black. His neighbor had broken his neck. After watching this footage, Chris felt sick to his stomach. While he thought his neighbor was stupid for attempting such a dangerous prank, he never could have expected it would cost him his life. But there was something that Chris had failed to mention to the police, a crucial detail that would have major consequences. You see, in his neighbor's footage, just after the box toppled over and his neighbor broke his neck, Chris heard a noise that sounded incredibly familiar. When he realized what it was, he felt a shiver go down his spine. It was a sound that he knew very well, the screeching sound of his own garage door. Could it be that Chris was to blame for his neighbor's unfortunate incident? Instantly, Chris was hit by a wave of anguish and anxiety. Had he been responsible for his neighbor's death? What should he do? What would the police say about it? Surely they had checked the footage as well. They knew that the cause of the accident was the box toppling over. However, there was one essential detail. Just by checking the footage, the police had no way of knowing where the accident had taken place. They didn't know whose responsibility it was. For all they knew, the box could have fallen off the truck upon delivery or from one of the racks inside the truck. While reflecting on this, Chris came to an appalling realization. The police had no way of knowing that the accident had occurred inside his garage. Therefore, they were in the dark about the fact that it was Chris who dropped the box, causing his neighbor's death. Now, Chris was faced with a dilemma he could have never guessed he would have to encounter. Should he tell the police about what really happened? Should he tell them that the screech they could hear on the footage was his garage door? In other words, should he tell them that his neighbor died inside his house as a result of him dropping the box? Would he be able to live with the certainty that his neighbor died inside his garage and that he lied to the police about it? One police officer stopped the video right there and then. Then all the officers in the room turned back and looked at Chris for a few seconds. "I'm sorry for this," the officer said. "I can see that you're distressed. The footage is certainly quite disturbing, and I'm sorry that you had to watch it. But it's necessary. Now, with your permission and my fellow officers, I'm going to have to ask you a few questions about what we all have just seen playing on that screen. I would like to ask you if the box fell down inside your garage or after you picked it up," he said, giving Chris an ice-cold stare that looked like it could penetrate into his mind and his very soul. After a few tense moments that seemed to drag on forever, Chris finally spoke. Facing police officers who stared at him intently, he confessed everything. The box had fallen in his garage because he lost his grip on it, and tragically, it led to his neighbor's death. Fearing the worst, Chris wondered if he would go to jail. The officers appeared surprised by his response. One of them offered him a glass of water, while the one who had questioned him waited before replying. "Well, I'm sorry you're going through this, but you won't be charged with manslaughter. It was an accident. However, your neighbor's family might consider you responsible and could seek compensation. Ultimately, the judge will decide." Chris felt a wave of relief at not facing criminal charges, but now he worried about whether his neighbor's family would pursue legal action for compensation.